All right, welcome everyone. Today is Wednesday, the 13th of September, 2023, and this is the Cluster API project meeting. Cluster API is a sub-project of Kubernetes SIGs, and as such, we follow their meeting guidelines, which basically means please treat everyone as you would expect to be treated, which means please be kind to everyone, and also please raise your hand if you'd like to talk, and I will call on you. So at the beginning of our meetings, we like to give some time for new attendees and new community members to introduce themselves. So if you are new or would like to introduce yourself to the group, yeah, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. I hope I'm saying this right, Jabbar. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I am Jabbar Asadi. I am software engineer at D2IQ.
Awesome. Welcome aboard, Jabbar.
Thank you.
All right. I don't see any other hands going up, so we will move on to the next part of our meeting, which is the open proposal readouts. I think we only have one open proposal, and I'm not sure there's any changes here. I don't know, Jack or Richard. I don't know if either of you are around. I saw Jack here. Is there any comment here, I guess?
I wanted to call out, I'm actually furiously trying to update the doc, so I'll do this async after I make this quick announcement. I wanted to call out the earlier CAPE for managed Kubernetes to slightly change the contract, the behavioral contract with respect to KubeADM control plane. Again, I'll paste the link after this. I just wanted to call it, I'm back from leave after the summer. Before I went on leave, thank you very much, love it. Before I went on leave, we were not able to get consensus on merging this proposal. And so I just wanted to remind folks, if anyone is especially enthusiastic about getting this proposal merged as is or tweaking it to allow the folks who are currently dissenting to maybe reconsider, feel free to contact me, lean into the PR. This isn't my highest priority at the moment, so I just wanted to say that it's something that's in the background that I'm aware of, and would be happy to respond if there's community enthusiasm and reprioritize.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the update, Dad, and welcome back. And yeah, so like I'm very curious about this, so I will probably give it another read through. I guess anyone else out there who's curious about managed Kubernetes in Cluster API, please take a review if you have the time. Thanks, Jack. Okay, so let's get into our discussion topics here. It looks like the first topic is Andreas with a proposal. So please take it away, Andreas.
Yeah, I guess I should summarize again what the problem is, because not everyone's aware of this. So I linked the issue, and it's quite a big one. So I'll try to summarize. So if you have a machine pool, an AWS machine pool, and you change something in kubeadm config, let's say you want a new file to land on the nodes, the nodes don't get rolled, so no new nodes get created with your change. And there are a few problems involved here. Like it doesn't immediately get reconciled on Kappa side, and on the copy side, the bootstrap secret, which eventually creates the node, is also not immediately reconciled. And I don't think I have to summarize the rest. So there are a few problems here, 1 to 3, they are numbered in the issue. And I kind of have a fix for the first one, which is a simple bug of the kubeadm config reconciler. That's simple. And problem 2 and 3 are essentially about how does copy tell the infra provider, so in our case Kappa, that the bootstrap secret has changed, and that more than the bootstrap token has changed, because the token rotates every few minutes, just in case new nodes want to join. So if only the token changes, you don't want all the nodes to be recreated. But in my example, if you want to add a new file, for example, so kubeadm config.spec.files or whatever else of a change you make, you want that to recreate nodes. And that doesn't happen perfectly or not at all. And Yeah, so basically if you go to the comment I linked to, it's kind of at the bottom. Yeah, it's in the same issue if you scroll down. I do have a proposal. So we wanted to, a bit up. We wanted to see what contract we can make between copy and kappa. So this information that the bootstrap secret changed bubbles up or bubbles over to kappa, so it could react. And yeah, actually this is a good PR, but this was a hack. So what we want in the end is to, on AWS side, trigger an instance refresh of the autoscaling group. For other infrastructure providers, they might do similar things. In the end, kappa needs to know something has changed. So my proposal for the contract is, if you go to the comment on the other issue, yeah, a bit up. Yeah, that one. That one, exactly. So the bullet points. So basically what kappa does right now, which it shouldn't do, it reads the bootstrap secret, which could contain cloud init script, or it could contain ignition format, could be anything in the future. And that's very specific to kubeadm. So kappa kind of gets into the details of reading kubeadm stuff, which you probably shouldn't do that much. And it kind of tries to see if there's a difference from before. So that's already too specific. And what should happen is that copy tells the infrastructure provider, hey, something changed. So my idea was, if you look at the bullet point number 1, so if something in kubeadm config changes, we can store a checksum of the secret. So let's say I have the cloud init data, and there could be one checksum that contains the token, which is random, and there could be one checksum without hashing the token. That's relevant for us for rolling out new nodes. And this could be in the status object. And if that changes, then the machine pool will notice, the machine pool reconciler. And if we also store the checksum in the machine pool object, then kappa could also notice because it watches this object. And then it can see, hey, was there a difference? Am I going to roll out the nodes or not? So essentially contract by having 2 new fields in the status part of the copy objects.
So this is making sense to me, Andreas. I'm just wondering, does anyone have questions or comments about this?
We did have some responses from CC already, who clearly said, what was it about? Kappa shouldn't watch specific types like kubeadm config. So there shouldn't be a direct reading of that, but instead Kappa should have a look, did something change in the machine pool, for example? So it's really about making this contract. So where does a new field go? How do we define it? And then probably other providers should implement this. But yeah, I'm open for comments.
Cecile, please.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Andreas, for opening this proposal and explaining it so clearly. I think you and I are on the same page now. But yeah, essentially what I was pointing out is just that we shouldn't have infrastructure providers and bootstrap providers tight coupling, since infra providers should work with all bootstrap providers. But yeah, I think the machine pool status is a good compromise, since the infra providers can watch any of the core CABI types. And since this is a machine pool specific issue, it doesn't affect machines, right? I think it makes sense to keep it in the machine pool object. The one thing I wanted to ask is, I wonder if either Richard Case or Johanan are here, but I know there's some movement happening on the proposal to split up the OS configuration and the bootstrap stuff in kubeadm config. I'm going to paste the issue link here. Not that that should stop this proposal, but I think it might be a good thing to watch out for, because that other proposal might actually make it easier for the checksum to be calculated, just because then you could just watch everything that has to do with machine OS configuration and not worry about the bootstrap stuff. So just something to put out there as like might be relevant in the future to simplify this.
I think you mentioned this before. Does this mean the token will not be part of the Bootstrap secret anymore?
I don't know what the specific outcomes of the proposal will be, but the problem that we're trying to tackle is that the current Bootstrap provider tries to do two things at the same time, which are one, Bootstrap, so kubeadm token for join, and OS like Cloud Init Ignition config. So it's trying to separate those. And I think that got recently picked up like last week or 2 weeks ago, right? Again, yeah. So I think Johannan is actively working on this, so he might be a good person to reach out to if you'd want to chat how this might impact your other proposal.
Okay, makes sense.
Awesome. Thank you for bringing that up, Cecile. Stefan, you've got your hand up, please.
Yeah, just a question from my understanding for the status fields. Was the idea to add them on the Kubernetes config status and then bubble them up to machine pool, or was the idea to only have them on machine pool?
That was my latest idea that could basically work. Because the implementation side needs to be done in the kubeadm config reconciler or whichever bootstrapping it is. And then that needs to bubble up because the infrastructure provider only watches the machine pool object.
Yeah, and it has to be done by the in this example, the kubeadm config reconciler, not a machine pool reconciler, because the kubeadm config one is the only one who actually knows like where is the bootstrap token in this thing. But I mean,
and that's something changed.
Yeah, the machine pool provider wouldn't, sorry, the machine pool controller wouldn't know by just looking at the secret or something like that, because that is kubeadm specific. I see.
But I think the machine pool reconciler watches the referenced kubeadm config object and would notice if the status changes.
Yeah, that's totally fine. That's totally fine.
So it can bubble up and write the machine pool.
Yeah, absolutely. That works. I just meant like actually calculating the hash sums, like one with and one without bootstrap token. The only one who actually has information for that is the kubeadm.
That's implementation specific, right?
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense.
Do you think the status object is a good contract overall? Is it kind of consistent with the rest of the code?
Yeah, makes sense.
Cool.
I don't know what the alternatives could be, but maybe that just comes down to, I don't know, maybe a different field name sounds like slightly better or something like that. But I mean, nitpicking, that's not a problem. Yeah, seems like a doable solution at least. Spontaneously.
I mean, yeah, for this checksum information, the status does seem appropriate. You're +1 from me as well. Cecile, you've got your hand up, please.
Have we considered an annotation? I know that that's the eternal debate, status versus annotation for every new field, but in this case, it seems like it might actually make sense because it's not meant to be human readable, right? So if I, as a human, see the status field with the checksum, it doesn't mean much to me. And it's not something that we would necessarily, like if that information gets lost, if it gets reset, it's not the end of the world in the sense that it can just get recomputed and just pick up from where it left off. So now that I'm thinking about it more, does it actually make sense to put in status? Maybe not.
Annotation does the same thing, right? And it's easier to implement because you don't have API changes really. So I think it's just as good as using a status field.
I think there's a consistency argument there that we already have, I think, status.data secret name or something. So it might make sense to put like rated information in the same place and not in another one. I don't really want to bring it up, but there's also like this upstream guidance that people shouldn't really just use annotations and labels as APIs. I mean, it's easier, but it's also a downside, right? That it's like non-typed stuff and you just put it in annotation. I don't know, we're always doing this. Yeah. So, I mean, totally up for discussion. But I just wonder if it's a bit weird, basically, if you run the reconciler, then you put the name of the secret in status and the checksum of the same secret in an annotation.
So that's the question. What about other bootstrap providers?
And
my question back, how do they work?
Just one more thing about
Do
the
they-
checksum.
Yeah,
There
please.
might be also an issue around. So if you write the status data secret name, so if you want to write the status data secret name at the same time with the same API call as your checksum, so that it's absolutely atomic and in sync, then I think you have to put it into status, because the status call is a different call than the call against metadata. So to put like the secret name in the status and the checksum in the annotation, you will have two calls essentially. So there, if you're watching and
Right.
reacting too quickly, I don't know, maybe you run into race conditions that are a bit weird. Assuming your data secret name would even change.
You
probably.
might reconcile twice without wanting it. Yeah.
I could
Makes
imagine
sense.
it. We probably have to think through, but I could see problems there.
All right. Great discussion on this. Love to hear the design work. Are there any other questions or comments about this topic?
There's a question in chat by Fabrizio. What about other Bootstrap providers? I don't know many others, to be honest. Do they also write a secret that could be hashed, which is then used for nodes, or are the others like totally different?
Fabrizio, please, you've got your hand up.
Sorry, I just joined to a previous meeting going long, but so we are talking about a machine pool, which is an abstraction that can and could work on with many other Bootstrap providers, as far as I know. So we cannot design a solution that is based on how the covenant only the covenant provider works. And so currently, I think that we have to base the discussion on what the contract defines and what should be expected by any providers. Otherwise, we risk to break others. And in trying to answer to Andreas' question, there are no constraints about how they work in Cluster API internally. They can do basically whatever they want. There are few constraints which are defined by the Cluster API contract, which are about a set of fields or objects that has to be created. So these are the only stable point that we can use in designing a solution.
Stefan, you've got your hand up, but right before that, I just want to note that we're about 20 minutes into the meeting right now. We've been talking about this for about 10 minutes. So after Stefan, I'd like to move forward just so we can get to the other topics. And then we can come back to this at the end if there's more discussion. Please, Stefan.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short. So I think if I got it right, the generic concept here could be essentially you have a change in your Bootstrap config, which either requires essentially a rollup to your machines or it doesn't. Maybe that's like the common thing here. And the other thing regarding what other Bootstrap providers do we have, if I remember correctly, the AWS and the Azure provider, they both have like two sorts of machine pools. And isn't it like that one of those have their own Bootstrap config, like EKS config, or I don't know what the other name is, something like that. So maybe we could look into those other types of Bootstrap config objects and just see if that fits with them or not, or yeah. Just trying to generalize a bit in that direction and see if it also would make sense in those scenarios.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. So I would encourage if folks still have kind of questions and comments about this, please come to the issue here and leave more discussion there. And we can come back to this if there's time at the end and people still want to kind of go over it. Stefan, you've got the next topic with a bump, please.
Yep. Can you click on the link? I hope that's pointing to my PR. Yep, that's perfect. Okay, good. So I'll just explain the context. I know we had this discussion like a while back. Basically now I'm coming like with this TLDR here. So what I want to propose is essentially that we change the way that we bump Go versions. So today we basically change Go minor versions when necessary on the main branch. Basically we align to the Go version used by our upstream Kubernetes dependencies. That would just stay the same. So we're just trying to use the same Go version as our Kubernetes libraries are using on main. And today, we only bump patch versions on Go on release branches, basically after the minor release. And what I would like to change is that as soon as we have a release branch with a Go version, which is out of support, that we can also bump the minor version there. This would basically 100% align to what Kubernetes is doing there. And the reason behind it is that you can stay on a Go version which is supported, which also gives you the ability to pick up bug fixes and especially CVE fixes. And right now, basically, we have the situation, Go 1.19 is just now out of support. That is like one additional patch release. And now essentially we have on main and on 1.5, we have 1.20. On 1.4, we have 1.19, and that version is out of support, and it's going to stay out of support the next 2 months that we want to support 1.4. So in TLDR is basically, I just want to change the policy in a way that we can also bump the minor version as soon as the minor version we currently use is out of support. What I want to change is only the Go version that we use to build our controller images. I don't want to change the version in the Go mod file, because changing the version in the Go mod file would break basically our API consumers. If we suddenly change Go mod from 1.19 to 1.20, then it means that every consumer for a Go dependency also has to use Go 1.20 to be able to still compile. And I think that is basically a breaking change on a Go module level that is not necessary. And so it's something that Kubernetes is not doing. They're just keeping the Go mod version the same after a minor release, and they only bump the version that they use to build their stuff.
Well, this sounds pretty good to me, and it sounds like a nice upgrade, even if it might add a little bit more maintenance for us. Does anyone have questions or comments about this for Stefan? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands go up. So Stefan, I think you have the next topic as well.
Yep.
Yeah,
maybe
please.
one last point. I would probably keep this like open for a week or something, just see if we get objections within that time frame. And if we don't, merge the policy and bump accordingly. Okay. For that one.
Oh wait, sorry, you were talking about this one, right?
No, so yeah, I was still talking about this one, but
Okay,
just essentially,
cool.
I would like to have a lazy consensus or something of a week. I mean, if someone raises an objection until then we can extend this, of course. But,
All right, cool. Sorry. Now, please go
no
ahead with the
problem
next
at all. Okay, can you give me a co-host or something to share my
Yeah,
screen?
sure. Let's see here. Would you like me to stop sharing as well here?
Probably have to, so I can share. I'm not sure. Okay, let's see. Okay. You should see this Chrome window with the meeting notes, hopefully.
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, good. So I brought up this topic, I think 2, 3, 4 weeks ago. I don't remember. So basically, what I'm reading part of it, I'm adding a little bit more, and then I want to have a discussion around like, is it fine to do this change in 1.6, or I don't know, is it too breaking or something like that? So the high level picture is essentially that today we have like metrics bind address. It's binded on localhost 8080, which makes it pretty hard to scrape metrics, except if you know how to configure Prometheus that it scrapes metrics via port forwarding, or if you just expose it on localhost 8080. We did this in the past because we were basically saying just exposing metrics without any sort of authentication authorization is a security problem. So we just went to like localhost 8080, which makes slightly useless for most people. What this PR is doing, essentially, it is deprecating the old flag. It is adding 2 new flags. The behavior is the following. If you are still setting the old flag, everything will stay 100% the same. So you still get metrics exposed on this port without authentication and with HTTP, just exactly the same. If you don't set the old flag, but you set a new one, and that's the reason why it's called diagnostics and not metrics, I'll get there. So if you set a new one with an address and you set it with insecure, then you basically also get the same behavior as above. So you get just an unsecured endpoint on HTTP. But if you're setting only diagnostics address and either you set insecure diagnostics to false or you just don't set a flag, which makes more sense, then you get an endpoint which serves metrics on HTTPS, and it serves it with authentication authorization. What it essentially means is we do the same as upstream Kubernetes. Our metrics endpoint basically requires a service account token, and that service account token requires a corresponding cluster role and cluster role binding, where you're saying, okay, this service account should have access on /metrics. It's the same pattern as upstream, just in all controllers essentially. But you can decide if you want to do that. You can still keep the old behavior with those flags. So with the change I currently have in this PR, we would end up with the following default behavior. So if you're just looking at a binary, so let's assume you're not using our YAMLs that we publish, you're not using Classical, you just build your own YAMLs and deploy our controllers. So if you just look at the binary itself, if you don't set any flags, then per default you will get secure serving on 8.443. If you set the old flag, then the behavior will just stay the same. So that's basically what I'm saying, the same as above here essentially. So if you still want to set this old flag, nothing changes. I mean, we're deprecating it. So at some point it will go away and you actually have to set that to keep the same behavior. But if you set it, nothing will change with the next release. If you're consuming our YAML files, either because you, I don't know, you use customize and just take them from a repo, or because you're using Classical init or upgrade, you have the following options. If you don't set any environment variables, you will also get a secure serving on 8.443. If you want to keep the old behavior, you can basically set those two environment variables and they're just mapping to the flags. So this one here just sets the diagnostics address to localhost 8080. And this one is setting the insecure flag. So basically it's your choice on upgrade if you want to keep the old behavior and keep your monitoring basically the same, or if you want to use the new one. Yep. Okay, so I think at this point I will take comments if someone has one. Otherwise, of course, later on up here as well. And after that, I will just show a bit how that is currently running, assuming that my local env works.
It looks nice and clear, and I like the way you broke the options out there, and least surprise for our users. Does anyone have questions or comments about this? All right, I'm not seeing any hands go up, so maybe if folks are curious, like take a look at the PR.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would share a bit how it works essentially. So I currently have tilt up running, so local environment, all controllers deployed based on this PR. And yeah, so how do I actually get a metrics out of there? So so Prometheus config, you can look it up in the PR or in our repo, but essentially what we are doing is we have a Prometheus job called copy providers. That stuff is just the same. It's just like figuring out where to scrape from. The new thing is essentially that we're using authorization here with type bearer and with this credential file. So that means essentially take the service account of the Prometheus pod and just send it as a bearer token to the metrics endpoint. And that's what usually is already done if you want to get metrics out of the controller manager or the scheduler. It's just the same stuff. So it's basically a snippet to add this here. And what you also have to do is basically configuring that you trust the server endpoint and you don't want to validate the CA certificate. I mean, we can do another iteration if we want to, where we actually have like, we're actually validating the server certificate, but I think it's relatively fine to just say, okay, we're speaking HTTPS, so we don't, because we don't want to leak this token here, but we don't expect man-in-the-middle attacks between Prometheus and our controller to inject some wrong metrics there. I mean, as I said, we can do another iteration where we actually like have separate server certificates and stuff, but I think it's a lot of effort to establish this sort of trust between your Prometheus instance and your controller, but it's definitely possible. It's just not in this PR yet. So that's the config of Prometheus. What this will end up with is basically those targets. So we will get one target per controller. You see HTTPS, and yeah, I mean, it works. And of course, also in Grafana, we're just getting metrics out of the controllers, just as usually. I mean, there's no difference to scraping it in another way. I forgot something before, sorry. So if you're running the secure variant with metrics, you will get like 2 bonus features. So basically, now we have a secure endpoint, and when you have a secure endpoint, we can also put a lot more stuff there, which you usually don't want to expose per default. And what we're putting there is one thing, that is the pprof endpoints. So essentially, that means if you're running in the secure mode, you can enable pprof per default in production. You can only access it if you actually have a service account token, and otherwise nobody else can steal your stuff. So I think that's pretty nice, because essentially you can just get profiles out of your running controllers if you find some issues, and you don't have to restart your controller to enable the pprof endpoint, and then your issue is gone because the restart just fixes your issue. So pprof is one of them, and the other one is we add an additional endpoint which allows you to change the log level. So essentially, with a service account token, you send a put call, and in that put call, in a body, you just say, oh, log level 2 or 4 or 5 or 6, and that's what you'll get. That feature is also basically stolen from Kubernetes, just to mention it. Okay, so that was the metric stuff. Similar to metrics, we also have pprofs, profiles. So what you see here is basically the same target tab that exists in Prometheus and Parser. Parser is also just scraping regularly controllers for profiles. So you see here, it just found like the copy controller, and it's getting like this normal profile here, or this one gets the alloc profile, or whatever you want. So I mean, that depends on your config. The config of Parser is very, very similar to Prometheus, and you can enable the sending the service account token as a bearer fee just the same way. You can look it up in the PR. I configured it there. And then if you have that running, you can just, I mean, here you just see basically your profiles from the various controllers, and you just click on it, etc., etc. I leave it on that level for profiles. And then the last one here is log level. So what you have to do to make this work, I mean, that's the manual way. I was thinking about maybe just building a kubectl plugin or something at some point. But if you would do it manually, what you have to do is you deploy a cluster role. This cluster role essentially says debugs flex v2. So this non-resource URL is the important one. This one doesn't matter. So this blog post is doing a little bit more stuff. What we need is only the non-resource URL for debug flex v1. That's the endpoint where you can send your log level to. Then you bind it to a service account. This example just a default service account. Then you can get a token, and then you can send a token with curl. So that's just basically you do a port forward to your controller, and then you send it via curl on this endpoint, and that's all you need. Maybe I get lucky and it actually works. So I think, let me just look for my terminal on another screen somewhere. So the last thing I sent was, I think, log level 4. So what you should see here is logs on log level 4. I can't share my other screen. It's annoying. So I just do it on another screen and you don't see it. I know. Okay, 1 second. I think my token ran out because it was more than an hour ago. Yeah, so now I changed the log level to 2, which means you now shouldn't see any new logs with 4. So let's just deploy an entirely new cluster, and you should see that the only log levels, or I should use the browser search. That doesn't work as expected. Okay, just do it manually. So here basically you see V0, V0, V0 everywhere. And if I turn it back up to 4, you will see that there are long, or let's just do the nuclear option. So log level 8. Yeah, and now you get all those nice low level logs that you don't really want to read through. Yep, but that's it. Except there are questions.
Cool. Yeah. Very, very cool demo, and like great to see all this added. Yeah. Does anybody have questions or comments about what Stefan's showing us here? All right. I'm not seeing any hands go up. So thank you, Stefan, for the PR and for the demonstration. Okay, I've got the next topic here. We closed the poll this morning, and it looks like everyone wants to meet up tomorrow at 9 a.m. my time. We'll use the same Zoom as we're using for the community meeting here, and I've put together a small agenda that people should be able to go comment on and whatnot. I've got the meeting link in there, and just some questions we can go over. So this is mainly just a PSA. Anyone who'd like to join, please join us to talk about Carpenter tomorrow. So I guess, Nawaz, you've got the next topic about releases, so please.
Thank you. This is just an update on the migrated CI jobs to the EKS community cluster. So lately we have been seeing some test failures across all the release 1.3 jobs. The test pods would die unexpectedly. So we raised some concern on the SIG's infra channel, and the folks over there, they said that they're looking into it. I just wanted to share an update with respect to the release 1.3 jobs.
Great. Thank you for the update. And I see Mike is asking a question in the, unfortunately, Mike, yes. 9 a.m. at GMT -4 is 6 a.m. PST.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure I did the math right, so I got there at the right time.
Yes, yeah, yes, you did get that correct. And thank you, Nawaz, for the update. Were there any questions or comments about Nawaz's update? Okay, we will move on to the next topic. Fabrizio, you've got some stuff about KubeCon, please.
Yeah, thank you. So KubeCon is coming. People are doing plans and some info. We, as a SIG, we have a SIG intro, and we had also a Cluster API deep dive slot approved, and this is great. We now have the opportunity as a project, as a Cluster API community, to ask one or eventually more slots at the Contributor Summit. I will suggest one because it is only a day, and the risk of having 2 slots in parallel and divide the communities is high. But let's first. I will run a Slack thread to get an idea on how many of us plan to be in Chicago, and to get some idea on what we should talk about and see what to do. Unfortunately, the deadline to submit is very. I think that it is end of this week. I have to check. So I will take some risk, and it is Friday. Thank you, Steph. So yeah, if possible, please answer quickly, and I will take the risk to submit and decide to submit or not by Friday.
All right. Thank you, Fabrizio, for taking the lead on that. And I don't know if anybody has questions or comments, but I would just like to say I've been to a couple of the contributor summits for the Cluster API sessions, and I think if you're going to KubeCon and you have the opportunity to make it there, it is a tremendous opportunity to not only meet some of our colleagues and some of our peers, but also like the discussions have been just tremendously excellent at those Cluster API sessions. So thank you to the whole community for kind of making that happen. And Fabrizio, I look forward to the Slack thread, and look forward to KubeCon. So it looks like there are no questions or comments about KubeCon. There is a lively discussion about waking up too late for meetings in chat, which I appreciate. But there are no provider updates or feature group updates. So are there any other topics that people would like to talk about, or is there anything more to talk about on perhaps Andreas's topic or one of Stefan's topics?
I think on mine, I'm good for the moment. I will keep
Okay.
commenting in the GitHub issue and maybe write down more proposals once I get clear what we can do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andreas. And
thank you.
Great information you put out there, and very well laid out. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of our meeting. Thanks everyone for coming out, and I guess we'll see you all next week.
Thank you, Mike.
See you next time.